tell me what practices and principles you've got, and I tell you what your mindset is. Is it enabling freedom and flourishing, or is it perpetuating control, compliance, and suffering? Really about, I think, almost upskilling HR professionals to become those change agents, which we had in Dave Ulrich's original framework, but we never brought the change agent function to bear.
So here we are in the beautiful city of Porto at the Agile Congress 2024 World Summit, and I'm joined by Antoinette Weibel and Otti, Vogt, the co-founder of Global Society for Good Leadership. And Antoinette is also, thank you so much for joining. Antoinette is also professor of Agile Management at University of St. Gallen, and Otti previously was a CEO and a head of global transformation at ING. So thank you guys for joining, and today is a historic moment because we are launching the first global manifesto for HR professionals, for people, for professionals, from freedom to flourish. And this manifesto is a particular focus on performance management. So I'm turning to you first, Antoinette. Why did you feel, what does the evidence tell us? What does research tell us? Why did you feel that we need to launch this manifesto? And what does the data tell us about that performance management should be the focal point?
Well, we need to launch it because we know it for 25 years that performance management is broken. And I think it's really time to change it. Now, let me just pick three things which I can show these are clearly not the way to do it. The first one, performance feedback. It just does not work. The second thing, and I think we heard that at the conference quite often, performance appraisals, they do not produce truth. They're completely flawed. They have more biases. And what I find most shocking, they are not correlated to organizational performance. So why do it? And then the last one, where I did my own research with, is also is bonus or high-powered incentives. They make us working to the incentive, but then we forget about everything else. And it's even deleterious for organizational performance because it's creating so many hidden costs. And we still do it everywhere.
So performance management is supposedly driving performance, just simply not working. You cannot open an HR magazine or go on an HR portal without reading an article about reinventing performance management, getting rid of annual reviews, pulse surveys, but it's still not a real solution, isn't it? So what is the problem with that?
Well, I think it's just superficial. We go and say, oh, let's have a little bit of meaningful conversations, and then we believe everything works. But if we don't go to the fundamental, then we are really never going to have a good performance management. It's just not working like that.
And you mentioned the importance of connecting performance of the individuals and teams to organization performance. I'm turning to you, Otti. You've been having transformation at ING, and ING is famous for agile approach and agile methodology. So can you tell us about, from agile to excellence, how does it apply to performance management, and how does it apply to HR?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very, very good question. And of course, mirrors a little bit my personal journey in this endeavor with Agile. There are a number of things which are very important. The first is we loved Agile. I think with the founders of the Agile Manifesto, we shared almost a liberating spirit. It was almost a moment where we said, we need to focus more on the individual, on the person. We need to focus on learning. And I think a lot of people were very excited to translate this into a methodology where we would have a certain rhythm of sprints that would be faster, more engaging, the retrospectives and all those things. And in ING, we took it to a certain level of excellence in itself, which was great. Yet, in hindsight, there were a number of challenges with Agile, which I think most of the practitioners recognize. Not only the fact that many companies started to call us and say, we want to become Agile. And we were kind of asking back, why do you want to become Agile? And very often they did not know, right? It was just everybody wanted to be Agile. The challenges with Agile were, it was only a methodology, right? So we were talking about how to prioritize items on the backlog or how to do Agile coaching, but we did not challenge the context. And the problem with that is that very often the way of working and the type of ideology that Antoinette mentions is embedded in other elements which were not part of Agile, such as the organizational structures, relationships between people, and the values and culture very often embedded by the leadership. So you cannot just touch a small element in the wider context of an organization if you truly want to generate business transformation. What Antoinette and I are bringing is an interesting combination of the research on the one hand, showing all the broken parts, and the wider picture of how do you bring a specific process into the context of a wider business transformation journey. And when we sat down with a lot of practitioners in Amsterdam last year at the HR Horizons conference, pondering about which process in HR to focus on, and everybody said, let's do performance management, because it is the most critical process in HR, which almost combines all the elements in HR. But secondly, it's the one that can be the greatest lever in bringing the role of HR as a change agent for the wider business to bear. Here, HR has a true opportunity to influence how the business will work and how to shape the future of work. Yet, as Antoinette said, it happens to be the most broken process of all. Right? So we really felt this was the element where we could all add value, and we brought together over 30 volunteers across practitioners, academics, and consultants. And I want to say a big thank you to all of those who came on this journey to build this manifesto, building on Agile, but connecting it to wider change in business and a business transformation journey.
So Antoinette, tell us about the main principles of the manifesto. I love the name, by the way, freedom to flourish. And I looked around the audience, I spoke with many people, everybody responded very positive. So what are the main principles of the Flourishing at Work manifesto?
Performance management at present, because it's embedded in such a context, is really one of the main contributors to suffering. So when we started to work, we also said, what would be the opposite of suffering? That is flourishing. The principles then kind of mirror this transition. So it's from where we are very often still now, control and compliance. We have lots of budget gaming, maximization of profit. So rather we want to have purpose and social value. Individual appraisals, but towards system change, from forced rankings to bonuses to really understanding we have to grow better together. So I mean, these are really the four main principles. And then Otti, maybe you can explain how we then translate that into overarching principles.
Yeah, I think it links back to what you, Antoinette, said at the very beginning. So how we think about business is very strongly connected to our mental paradigms. And what we have tried to do by combining different disciplines across political science, psychology, philosophy, management science, and complex system thinking. Some people might remember Frederic Laloux's teal with the different colors. So our model is similar. We're kind of saying, tell me what practices and principles you've got, and I tell you what your mindset is. And if you understand the logic that connects the two, you can actually yourself start to revise every single method that you're adopting to see what type of mindset, what type of view of what a human being is even. It supports. And that gives you, I think, a lever to look at every aspect of your system, your policies, your practices to say, is it enabling freedom and flourishing, or is it perpetuating control, compliance, and suffering? So it's really about, I think, almost upskilling HR professionals to become those change agents, which we had in Dave Ulrich's original framework, but we never brought the change agent function to bear.
What caught my attention, you mentioned there are no bonuses in performance management in a manifesto. You get rid of bonuses. Of course, reward for performance doesn't work. And of course, no man is an island, by the way. So no individual can really achieve anything without the right support. But how do you still maintain and recognize individual performance, those who are actually making a significant contribution?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have to be all proud, and we have to give gratitude to people who are really, really outperforming in a certain moment. But then, of course, I mean, there are some rewards which can still kind of express that gratitude. So you can do small, on-the-spot rewards. That's a good thing to do. You could even go to larger, high-impact rewards when you make sure that it's really tied to social value and when it's really driven by the team as well. And I think what we prefer most is profit sharing, because I mean, it is all about we're contributing and thriving here together. So it just makes sense to share some of the profit back.
And maybe again bringing this logic to bear.
Right.
I think the simple question you have to ask yourself as an HR professional is, are you instrumentalizing people for the purpose of your own agenda or just having bigger share price? Are you bringing out the best in the individual and in the community? And I think that's a very easy test that we can answer, right? And I think the first step is that people actually understand what are these ideologies that are shaping us every day of our lives without us being conscious of them. And here again, I would suggest that the biggest challenge in a business transformation journey is create a system that is self-reflective, that starts to see itself so that with consciousness and a commitment towards something that matters, which hopefully is more than just profiting at the expense of others, is taking the necessary steps to, as Antoinette says, look at all the elements. That includes the individuals, that includes the culture, and that includes the structures and institutions and policies. And here again, I would suggest, especially in HR, we are very often not very good at organizational design, institutional design, and looking at the policies. We are focusing on the psychological aspect of the individual or the next round of meditation classes.
And your global expertise in transformation, I mean, if somebody buys into the idea and says, yeah, that sounds great, I'd like to explore further, I'd like to bring it to my organization, but that's a very complex transfer stage. So you, based on your experience and expertise in HR and global transformation projects, why HR plays a critical role in this, and what are the challenges they might face along the journey?
Again, it's a very good question, and I think what Antoinette pointed out, or what you pointed out in terms of performance management, we knew some of these problems for a long time, yet we haven't made a lot of significant change, at least not at a large scale. The same is true in transformation. I remember being part of the Brightline initiative, arguing for the installation of chief transformation officers, because in many organizations, the basic expertise of managing transformation lacks. We're still going back to Kotter's 7 principles, or packaging culture and then trying to bring it into an organization from the top down and bringing people on board. So all these old-fashioned ways of thinking about transformation. So a transformation like the one we're envisaging is I think, very complex and challenging in a number of ways. One is the technical element. You need to understand that an organization is a social system. And it means you have to operate on all these different parts of the system and bring them together in a configuration which, as we argue, shapes the organization as a character rather than as a culture. And there's a lot of depth in this difference between the two. Secondly, as Antoinette and you pointed out with your remark, it's about leadership. It's about power. It's about politics. It's about freeing up people to really be themselves and become themselves in the context of an organizational system. So leadership can be a huge enabler. If the board and the CEO and everybody is with you, you can make fast progress. If the system is resisting change, as it so often is, it becomes a huge blocker. And what I've learned in leadership is the toughest challenge for people who have their corner offices and their secretary and a big title is to let go of leadership. You need to be ready to give the power away to create something which is much greater than yourself. And that is, of course, a maturity process that many leaders have not fully gone through yet. And the environment, again, doesn't ask for that. And thirdly, I would say, the world is big and complex and very ambiguous. So one organization changing is insufficient to address the challenges that we find ourselves in today. So again, we actually, and this is why a conference like this is so wonderful, we need to find ways to create scale across organizations and different actors and create the affordances for organizations and the people within them to become better. So you need to create a change in the environment that raises the potential. HR, I think, has a potential to do that, and they might even have a direct line to the supervisory board and bring such things on an agenda where functional divisional heads cannot go. But on the other hand, HR, sadly, in most organizations, finds themselves in what we called a marginal leadership position, where everybody's claiming that people is everything we care about, yet HR has very little power, very little resource, and actually finds themselves mostly struggling with transactional problems in some outsourcing domain, or the wonderful world of AI and technology and analytics, which I think becomes very quickly a distractor of the more strategic themes.
Now, Freedom to Flourish Manifesto is far from being complete. It's far from being done. So, Antoinette, how would you expect the community to actively engage and contribute, and also the role of academia in the creation of this wonderful manifesto? What would you suggest?
Well, first of all, please, 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 please go all to the website, have a look at the manifesto, come up with your suggestions, correct it, bring in very interesting new HR practices which fit. That would be really perfect for us. So that's the first thing. The second thing is connect us. Connect us to influencers to bring it out to the world, to interesting and interested companies, because we need to experiment. And that is, of course, also something where I would call my colleagues in. So what do I want from academia? Well, I would say get real, step out of the ivory tower and help us to do field experiments, because that's what we really need. We need to understand, are we moving towards freedom to flourish or not?
There's interestingly a huge disconnect between academic research and practices organizations. So if anything we can do to bring the two closer together,
That would be really great.
that would be marvelous.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time today. It's been wonderful speaking with you. I'm wonderful having you here in Porto. And of course, the journey continues.